Hi, welcome back to part four of my series talking about the missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to the social dynamic between dogs and humans. And this goes into, again, I talk about the core ingredients, influence and control, how they're reconciled, okay, by way of a intentional interaction based process. But the difference, okay, the confusion by way of that structure, that social structure as it relates to dogs, okay, in their natural environment, and what we see at the physical level, and assumptions we're making even there, assumptions that are being made, not appreciating that there's a difference, okay, in terms of depth of what that represents, and socially, what's going on, and then how that again transfers over and the difference between the dog and human social structure, but the ability to truly reconcile those core ingredients the right way. And this is where I get into the language of the method, okay, how it aligns, okay, through you see certain interactions that are very the integrity of those, why those need to come together to make sure that those align properly. So you're transferring from one to the other, and what they're doing to change the perceptions of dogs. Okay, and so, and then again, you're going to see it here on this series on the next video I'm going to play here in a bit. How this whole misunderstanding in terms of appearances, at the physical level, how that's exploited. Okay, how that's being misrepresented, and then how that plays into this ideology. Okay, where I talk about a counterfeit picture, people's emotions, the bias effect, okay? And this whole even talk about the death before discomfort agenda, okay? How all these bad things are happening from a lack of connecting the dots properly, context, right? So when I say there was never a proper study done properly to, again, to provide proper insight into that social aspect of the relationship that way, what that truly means, it was never done. Okay, so I wrote a book about it called The Mind and Body Connection. I go into Skinner, Pavlov. I go into the research notes. Okay, so now we're at a place again in society where this is very hard and difficult information because of the culture. Okay, what's been set in motion here, and so it's a lot of hard truth I'm putting out, but it's only been hard because of what has been happening and where this is all where we're at. And so to back out of this is a very difficult issue. So that's why I talk about, yes, you can, get in this whole thing about Fouche and Millan and, the takeaways from that, but it goes further than that. Okay. So I show examples of the blind side effect. Okay. Of not getting the right information, those core ingredients not aligning properly. And you see this with more so when I talk about the 1 percentile dogs. Okay, they expose the problems that people have to line this up. Okay, you have to want to see it because there is a trade-off. Okay, understand the issue here is there's no wiggle room here. You have to let this ideology go, and you have to go deeper here. So that can be very challenging for trainers who are making, again, this is a set, making all the money, popularity, the emotional bias, exploiting that people's emotions. There's so much here that it's like the perfect storm. Okay, this is where we're at, and my goal is to help dial people into what's going on here. So let's play some more of this. Again, this is Dr. David Mech, as I fellow Canadian. Um, and he's having a discussion again, talking about the family, human family comparisons. And like I said before, it doesn't, there's some, you can line some of it up that way, which can be helpful to kind of nudge people in the right direction. But there's some depth here with the intensity of that. Okay, that's the problem. Is like when I talk about just the level like animals. Okay, that survival of the fittest, that type, and I use the example of the injured dog, and becoming aggressive because the human put the emotion into it and wouldn't let it go. But once I line that up, then guess what? The aggression went away. But again, sitting down because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It seems to affirm that the dog was injured. and then became aggressive. It was because of the injury. This happens. We get into animal rehab, and a lot of emotional people going into animal rehab. If you really look at it, I experienced that. I had to separate myself from a dog rehab organization in Miami because it just broke my heart. I mean, I had two dogs that were aggressive, got them in a really good place. They were sent back, and once I realized what was really going on there, and the person admitted that, there's a lot of these dogs end up getting destroyed anyway, but they're generating, money hand over fist because people emotions, right? Physical is different, yes, physically, but then relationally, socially, okay, that's a whole different matter. Those things they come together. They're part of the package deal. What makes dogs dogs. You can't invest in one and not the other without problems. So, see, this is the problem. So it's a human. This is a human problem here. Understand, this is a human. This is all about the human. Okay, not in a good way. But we have to go deep. So we've gotten ourselves in this situation. So let me play some more of this. This is a conversation between a trainer and Mech, talking about his observations. Okay, as a research scientist related to wolves, dominance, making comparisons.
We're already on to number two. Number two, based on your experience studying wolves, in your opinion, would you say it would be possible for a human to lead your dog in a relationship analogous to the way a breeding male or female would lead their pack members, or a parent would lead their child?
Well, as I said, I'm not an authority on dogs. I can't speak to that.
Correct. So what I'm saying with that, I understand that you're not, but as we talked about in the first question, would you say that that a human leading their offspring would be similar to a breeding male or female leading their pack members within a pack in let's say in nature?
I guess I don't understand. Repeat that or say it in a different way. Are you talking about humans trying to lead dogs again? Is that
correct? Correct. What I mean is,
I don't know.
Okay, you don't understand the dog part. Yeah. Okay.
So here you have a trainer. What he's doing here is trying to, he's trying to generate some themes here, right, to transfer over into more of a leadership focused type of training methodology. Okay, so you get into balance training versus force free. And you'll see this, like trying to take his study aspects of what he's saying to try to support, say, the balanced idea of things. And this is where I say there's a problem here because, balanced dog trainers, okay, they'll emphasize leadership, certain tools, but then they still approach training as a learning-based exercise. So they still fail to consider how those core ingredients are reconciled properly. Okay, so they will they advocate what's called the four quadrants, and that's the setup for generating this picture, which often again sets up a counterfeit picture because it doesn't reconcile those core ingredients properly. Okay, because it's not specific to reconciling them through, when I talk about a interaction-based method that brings it into a power play level, and all the themes I talk about, with the right language and method, it doesn't do that. Okay, so that door is open, completely wide open to perception of dogs not changing. And you'll see it. If you put everything I say to the test, you'll see these outcomes over and over and over again where people end up with a counterfeit picture. The relationship doesn't resolve. Okay, still bad things are happening. So you got to line that up. But if you have to do it in a way that's objective, right, and be honest about it, right, and see there's so much that's not happening in the dog training community because this is set up, this has been established, and so blaming dogs has almost become normalized. Okay, you have to walk this back and start to challenge. So what he's doing here, you can see it. He's trying to draw off certain themes here, but again, you have to go further. Okay, you can see that's the problem. You never get anything resolved because and you see it. I put up a lot of videos in my series talking about how balanced dog trainers, they're in a catch-22 situation. They're in a trap they can't get out of because of what they've come into agreement with. So there's no wiggle room here. There's no way. That's why they keep getting challenged and challenged and challenged. In the study with Mech is exploited as well. Okay, through a lack of depth in terms of understanding, what that represents. So I'm going to jump to the next video here. You can watch the entire video yourself here, but that's basically the what's happening here. This one here is going to show. Okay, I'm going to play a lot of this. How, okay, this lack of depth, lack of understanding into the social aspect, what that really means, how appearances are exploited by, you talk about the title of the video, no, your dog doesn't think you're the alpha. So we talk about the force-free, side of things here, okay? But understand all of it's contaminated, okay? The dog training community. And so because those core ingredients, they're not reconciled properly. But here you're going to see how this is exploited, okay? This is like, this video has almost like 1 million views, okay? So play some of this.
There are some very cute, well-trained dogs out there. You know, the ones that can high-five or walk on their hind legs. But the methods people use to train their dogs can be much less adorable. In dog training, the term alpha is thrown around a lot. And this idea of the alpha dog has been popular for years. According to so-called alpha pack theory, dogs live in social hierarchies where the top dog, or alpha, decides who gets to mate, eat, and do basically anything else. And every dog wants to be the alpha. But
pay attention as the video moves along, how, the issue about the social structure in certain aspects, talk about, Dom's, how it's degraded, okay? How she will slowly just pick away at this to bring it into alignment, okay, with this permissive bribery-based ideology, okay, based on appearances. Because the study itself is also based on appearances. So because of the lack of depth, it does not align with what the type of strength and weakness and influence control through that hierarchy, through the structure itself. It's not, it's diminished by way of just looking at the physical level. Okay, not lining this up. Okay.
To train or even live with your animal, you have to get them to think you're the alpha by exhibiting behaviors that, according to this theory, dogs use to let other dogs know they're on top. Things like staring your dog down, always going through a doorway first, or rolling them onto their backs to show them who's boss. But here's the thing. Alpha pack theory isn't true.
So here's right away. So this is the point of, objection, right? Where right here, and you always have this undertone too when you hear these individuals on social media. There's always this, you can tell, this really kind of disdainful undertone, and you'll hear like a lot of inflammatory rhetoric. There's that emotional bias, right? It just starts to make its way in, right? And it's this really kind of, it's rebellion, really. I talk about it is just like, you know what, I'm going to make my crooked path straight. That's really what it is. It's like, but it's taking, right, what isn't done properly in terms of a study, right, and it's in taking appearances to another level. Okay, that's really what's going on here. So it's like, and so this is the problem. It's just like how this whole thing, moves along and it gets to that point. And there's, and so it's like, and understand. So when something isn't based on the truth, real science, this is what happens. Okay, I talk about the dog training world is like the worst example of how people can label something as science and it be totally corrupt. Like you can't see a better probably example out there as to where, and then ignore all the problems, right? I talk about all the problems happening in the dog training world, and people just trainers just writing it off. They don't want to talk about it. And so when I put out information saying, here it is, here's the piece that's missing, okay? And you can line it all up. It's, it's being it's like, totally no, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna pay because, you get these, it's the human problem, right? It's like, oh, I'm set up. I mean, I'm doing well. They're all playing all sides, right? It's a rig, I call it a rig kind of Ponzi scheme is what it is. It's got to follow the money, right? It's like so corrupted.
It comes from a misunderstanding of both wolves and dogs, and there are much better ways to interact with animals. This theory has its roots in a study done in the 1940s when a scientist did behavioral tests on a pack of wolves that had been caught in the wild. He placed 10 wolves from different packs in a small enclosure and noticed they formed a social hierarchy. Some animals seemed to control the distribution of resources, and resources were passed down to other wolves based on their rank in the group.
So even one word can change things. So, you'll always pay attention, like seem to control, right? There's that bias that's right because it's already going into trying to, knock a study, right? And it's easy to do, right? If the study itself isn't done correctly. Okay, I understand that. That's the problem here. Is like all the studies, there's been a recent, like, balanced dog trainer study. Look, the one Ivan Belanoff put his own, balanced trainer, and that is inherently flawed from the beginning because, like I said, you have to wipe the slate clean. You got to bring in the social properly, the social dynamic, and then line this up with outcomes. Okay, look at all. I have my own study on my website. Okay, involving over 1,000 dogs and owners, so people can take that for what it's worth. But I talk about this. There's nothing hidden here. You can line the stuff up.
The researcher named these ranks after the letters of the Greek alphabet. So the alpha wolves got the first pick of food, the betas just below them got the second pick, and then came the omega or omegas, the most submissive. Based on this, he proposed that the bigger, bossier wolves used aggression and hostile behavior to establish that they were in charge. And then everyone took this idea and just ran with it. See, the domestic dogs we see today, from the smallest poodle to the largest Great Dane, are all descended from a common ancestor shared with wolves. And although dogs have been comfortably living with us for at least 15,000 years, their relationship with their wild cousins often leads us to believe the animals act in similar ways, which is how...
Well, they do, okay? They're all inherent. They're pack animals, okay? So it's inherent to that, to their nature. So you can line this stuff all up.
How the public's understanding of wolf pack research from the mid-1900s led to the idea of alpha dogs. Today, dog owners are often instructed to take the role of the alpha and show their animals that they're in control of all resources and therefore must be obeyed.
And so that's where you get into this thing about, I talk about the going deeper. So you get into the Fouche, Millan, right? Controlling certain things, even like you heard words like general terms like discipline, punishment, even balancing corrections. But again, the issue here is in terms of reconciling what control, influence, its role. That's why I talk about being dialed into, once a relationship problem's underway. How to reverse that through the right process, right? So that the integrity of that has to come together. So the integrity of that coming together is similar to the integrity of the social structure itself, the difference, right? So what I'm doing here through a process is aligning the integrity of what that represents by way of the dog pack in its natural environment, and then the integrity what that represents by way of the human dog social alignment. Okay, so it's proper alignment is what it is, and with those core ingredients being aligned properly, bringing that into proper alignment. It's not in proper alignment. Okay, through how the idea of, say, balance training, even the type of Cesar Millan approach, and you'll see it through the problems. Okay, you can see it through the disconnect, through the blindsiding moments, through unresolved behavioral issues, okay, ongoing, okay, you'll see it through. So you can actually, establish, okay, what I'm saying through outcomes. Okay, if you line up these outcomes, you do a unbiased, objective study, you're going to see that alignment problem, okay, you're going to see it.
Wolves don't actually act like that. Since the 40s, many scientists and naturalists have observed wolf packs both in enclosures and in the wild, including one hugely influential one named David Mech, who spent 13 summers in the late 80s and 90s observing wolf packs in their natural habitats. Mech found that wolves in the wild live in large family-style groups where two parents will sire and raise a couple litters of pups. He also noticed that wild wolf packs don't exhibit the intense aggression and competition that were seen in the captured wolves. In fact, they work together as a family to raise young.
So here's the thing. So we get this whole thing about, the differences here, trying to tear down, poke holes, okay, in a study put forward through observation that way at the physical level. But understand the study's already, got holes in it like Swiss cheese. You can run a transport truck through it because, it fails to consider, in terms of at the social level, the depth of what that represents, that interplay. We talk about, strength and weakness defined that way through the integrity of that, what that actually represents. Okay. Like I said, there's dynamics there that are things happening that that people walk away from, say, well, because we don't see overt conflict the way that should, the way trying to make certain observations or certain takeaways, and there's again a lack of consideration, the fact of those interplays themselves, the depth of that in terms of submission. And when you don't see overt conflict, it isn't because that intensity level isn't there, right? It's because of of the social dynamics with the interplay of saying, hey, you know what, it's some things are just known, okay, and I'm going to submit, and so that hierarchy, the way it plays out, it'll look cooperative, right? And that's the problem, is like that cooperative thing that's happening from appearances leads to a wrong interpretation that the intensity isn't that in that strength and weakness and just how fierce that is diminished somehow. It just because we're taking a wrong view, a wrong interpretation away from at that level, at the appearance level. Like, really think about that. That's exactly what's going on. Okay, just like you go and the human example is like you could have conflict, say, with individuals that usually the mouthy ones are the ones that are the weakest. It's the silent ones, right? You got to watch out for sometimes because they're the ones that are the intense ones, right? They're the ones that they don't have to say anything. They have the confidence, right? I don't have to, try to use my mouth. I'm confident in my abilities. Okay, and so it's not on display that way. I mean, but that level of knowing, okay, socially, that's there. That's that connection part with dogs. That's what makes dogs incredible. But what we take away from that, we walk away with the wrong view, and it plays into this ideology. It's a trap, right? Because our emotions now are all part of it. So it lacks context, right? And then when some of these trainers try to push this back, they're not able to, even the force-free trainers, because they're in agreement with a lot of it, right? So they can't push it back. So I'm going to stop this part here. I'm going to continue the series, but my goal is to dial people into some realities here as to what's really going on. That there has to be a need to understand the disconnect here and line this up properly so that, if you're a dog owner or trainer, you can have, a proper outcome and be able to discern and not get blindsided. Understand this social aspect, proper alignment, by way of dog and human, not just looking at dog and dog, but there's a difference. Thanks for watching.